The framers of the Constitution awarded Congress for maintaining its equilibrium in relations with the government's executive and judicial branches is the power to conduct investigations. How well has Congress exercised that power? What evidence can you offer to support your response? What purposes should the congressional power to investigate serve? How effectively has Congress balanced its investigative powers between obtaining information and assessing blame for government acts or omissions? What evidence can you offer to support your response?
Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 31, "Caution and investigation are a necessary armor against error and imposition." Although investigation was never written in the Constitution, it had been practiced by British Parliament and in the colonies prior to 1776, and has been authorized by the Supreme Court. In his majority opinion in McGrain v. Doherty, Justice Vandervanter wrote, "The power of inquiry, with process to enforce it, is an essential and appropriate auxiliary to the legislative function. Through investigation, Congress can check the other branches and better fulfill its legislative duties."
While congressional investigation can serve many purposes, the most common is to oversee the executive branch. The first congressional investigation dealt with the disastrous St. Clair expedition of 1791, where 950 of General St. Clair's troops suffered casualties in an Indian war due to being undersupplied. Congress's investigation revealed that the Secretary of War, Henry Knox, was negligent in failing to supply the troops, and Congress raised additional Army regiments as a result. The original legislative hearing served to oversee the executive branch, and this oversight has remained the primary and most proper function of legislative investigations.
One of the most successful instances of legislative investigation was the Truman Committee during World War II, which held hundreds of hearings which uncovered wasteful government military spending and defective equipment, and has been credited with saving the federal government billions of dollars.
An equally successful usage of legislative inquiry was the Watergate investigation into the administration of President Nixon. Following the Watergate break-in, Congress investigated the Nixon administration's involvement in the break-in and subsequent cover-up. The Watergate Committee took the unprecedented step of suing the president to access tapes and documents, leading to impeachment proceedings and the eventual resignation of President Nixon.
Congressional investigations have also been held to help Congress perform its Article 5 power to propose constitutional amendments. In 1970, the Senate Judiciary Committee held hearings on the then proposed Equal Rights Amendment, which was designed to combat sexual discrimination. More than 60 witnesses testified both for and against the proposal, providing essential information on its effects.
The Senate likewise conducts investigation concerning the President's nominations as part of its advice and consent power under Article 2, Section 2. During Sonia Sotomayor's Supreme Court confirmation hearing, the Senate Judiciary Committee investigated a controversial statement made by Sotomayor in a previous speech that a wise Latina woman could make better judgments than a white male. When confronted about this statement, former Judge Sotomayor said, "I do not believe that any ethnic, racial, or gender group has an advantage in sound judgment." The investigation was successful because it provided the Senate with the necessary information needed to confirm the president's nominee.
However, Congress has also improperly used its investigative power by inquiring into matters without a valid legislative purpose. For 20 years, the House Un-Americans Activities Committee focused on finding communists in America, and in one investigation, the committee held hearings on John Watkins, a labor organizer, to identify former communists he knew. But he refused, saying this was outside the committee's authority.
The Supreme Court agreed in Watkins v. United States, ruling that we have no doubt there is no congressional power to expose other than for the sake of exposure. The committee overstepped its legislative bounds by investigating only to defame Americans who are constitutionally entitled to be communists.
An equally ineffective use of legislative investigation were the recently conducted investigations into the 2012 Benghazi attack. Legislative oversight is crucial, but in this instance, no fewer than 33 different committees held hearings over that incident, with no legislative action having been taken as a result. Summarizing this fact, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence has reported that the Benghazi attacks have been the subject of misinformed speculation and accusations long after the basic facts of the attacks have been determined, thereby distracting attention from more important concerns. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you. Let's follow up on the Benghazi. Thank you. What, and you, as I understand what you just said, is that there are credibility issues and partisanship issues with the Benghazi investigation. What, and we don't want that, right? I mean, we want to have credibility with these investigations. We want them to be proper. How would you, what actions would you take to make that happen?
Well, what we see with Benghazi is that initially there's absolutely a valid purpose for investigation in that attack. We saw loss of American lives. It was an attack on an American embassy on foreign soil. And so at first there's absolutely valid purpose. However, with the continual investigation, as we mentioned, there was 33 investigations conducted on the attacks. And when no further information is uncovered, after various claims from partisan individuals claiming certain misconduct, we can see that this is when it gets repetitious and ineffective. So possibly a check to prevent this from happening is set a certain limit on the amount of investigation that can be done after there have been a number that have been conducted without more information.
An additional way to limit this amount of partisan oversight and overuse of oversight would be to get more moderate members into Congress and into these committees that are doing the oversight. And the way to accomplish this would be to change the redistricting laws and rules, or gerrymandering. So currently state legislatures can draw political boundaries to favor a party and create safe districts, which allow more right-wing or left-wing members to be elected into Congress more easily. So if we change gerrymandering rules, perhaps giving them to independent judges rather than state legislatures, this would put less partisan people into Congress who would be less willing to abuse partisan hearings into the executive branch.
What role do you think television and the media that we have now affects the partisanship that you're talking about right now?
I think the role it plays is that it definitely broadcasts like talking heads and sound bites of people who are obviously being partisan to like please their constituents. For example, going back to Lindsey Graham on the partisan Benghazi hearings, he demanded that he would filibuster all of President Barack Obama's nominees to the Supreme Court until there was more government transparency on the Benghazi investigations. And this was basically just a soundbite to please his constituents who are agreeing with him that there should be more transparency.
And also to follow up, media does tend to sensationalize, and when that is brought to a investigation, that tends to bring sensationalized ideas to the investigation themselves. Along with Senator Graham that he mentioned, there's also people like Representative Darrell Issa who have made comments saying that if it was up to them, they were going to have hearings for every week for 40 weeks on the same investigation on Benghazi. So when that's being broadcast to the masses, you have polarizing reactions to the general public. You have people, so it creates a further partisan divide with people that are wanting more of these partisan investigations and other people who are just shaking their heads at a sort of improper use of government.
Also with the sensationalism, we saw during the second Red Scare, Senator Joseph McCarthy, he was able to go on television. It was a more new technology at that time, but he was able to go on national television and he was able to claim that he had the list of 205 different communists, and by doing that, he was able to create all these legislative hearings on communism, on identifying communism, because he made it such a national issue, because there was so much public opinion for being mean to these communists.
We kind of focused on the negative. Let's focus on the positive now. What do you think have been some of the more exemplary investigations by Congress?
Well, initially, many of the congressional investigations had a purpose for military affairs. As we mentioned, the St. Clair expeditions in our opening statement. There was also a notable investigation on Bull Run, which initiated the Civil War. These were all usually to assess the actions of generals or the way the troops were supplied. So these are usually proper in ways to better prepare the America's military and cover any defective military officials.
Another proper investigation was that of the hearing of Justice Clarence Thomas, because his nomination was clouded with this air of him being involved in a sexual scandal or sexual misconduct in the workplace. And that was likely a partisan issue, And so it was important that he was investigated by the Judiciary Committee before he was put onto the Supreme Court, because had there been no investigation, some of the Senate might have yielded to these partisan passions and not confirmed him, but instead, because of the hearing, they were able to get on.
Additionally, the everyday hearings that that congressional committees hold over their bills relating to their subject matter are effective because with so many members of Congress, you've got 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate. They can't all be experts on everything. So these committees have to hold hearings and gather testimony to discover the effects of proposed bills, which allows them to effectively legislate and perform their functions.
Thank you. Good summary.
Extra credit question. What state was Justice Van Devanter?
Wyoming.
Yeah, I thought you did great. I thought you clearly know your subject. You had a good rapport with one another. I like the balance of facts that you gave with regards to the reasons that certain decisions or investigations were good. You gave enough of that you could understand why that was those were good use of Senate investigative power. And great job.
I like your gerrymandering response. That's the first time that came up, and I hadn't thought of that. But you know, that was an intriguing response. It was one that I never thought of until it was there, and I've been thinking about it through the rest of the question process. So I thought, you know, that was excellent on it as to what might be a response and how to handle it, but you saw some of the abuse sides on it. I thought you did a nice job. You know, you started out with the first one, then you went the best, and then you went the worst, and you explained a little bit why they were good. You ended up about the mundane and how important the mundane is. So I mean, you hit all the basic aspects on it. So I thought you did a nice job. You all participated, and you know, wish you luck more.
Can I